It was over. The outcome was clear, the writing on the wall. Some would call it the end of history. For some, like political scientist Francis Fukuyama, 1989 marked, quote, not just the end of the Cold War or the passing of a particular period of history, but the end point of mankind's ideological evolution and its final form of government. The liberal democratic order had not just won the century, but the future of nations. But 30 years later, it doesn't take that much inspection to find just the opposite. Countries across the world, from China and Russia to Hungary and the Philippines, are testaments to this rise and strengthening of illiberal democracy and authoritarianism, and we, the leader of the free world, are failing horrendously to meet this challenge. The reality is that we're facing our own crisis of confidence, a growing disillusionment with our own freedoms and our democracy. I'm Drew Sveda, and this is my Senior Sage. We like to think of our institutions as not just an enduring but impenetrable, almost immortal fortress. We like to think of the global slide away from democracy as across the oceans or on another hemisphere, separate from the American experience. Sure, we enjoy dystopian novels and movies, but we never seriously consider the potential for the same type of events to occur sometime down the road in our own country. But the truth is that no free society coasts off into the sunset. Freedom is never to be taken for granted or as a given. Didn't John Adams write that there was never a democracy yet that did not commit suicide? Wasn't it true that the new nation would have jubilantly enshrined Washington as the monarch, the king of America, if he would have accepted the crown like every other leader in human history? This is why America is, as Benjamin Franklin is said to have put it, a republic if you can keep it, because it intrinsically relies on the diligence of its citizens in protecting and standing up for their freedoms. Yet how can we hope to respect and defend our rights if we the people, especially among our generation, remain so apathetic to our politics and ignorant of our history? It should seriously concern you that research by two political scientists from Harvard and the University of Melbourne discovered that only about 30% of millennials think it's essential to live in a democracy, and less than 20% consider a military takeover of civilian government illegitimate in a democracy. On top of that, nearly half of Americans ages 18 to 29 support, per a 2017 Pew Research report, a government not of elected officials but of appointed experts, not to mention that, according to other surveys, 40% of Americans can't name a single right protected by the First Amendment, and a whopping 81% of Americans under 45 failed a basic multiple-choice citizenship test with questions like, what countries did the U.S. fight in World War II? Or how many seats are there on the Supreme Court? Almost like never before have Ronald Reagan's famous words seemed so relevant in the very heart of the free world. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. With such looming danger to our system, and in a time of such harsh division, why do we as Americans remain so indifferent towards politics and becoming politically active? In the face of such a crisis and skepticism of our freedoms and democracy, why do we spend so much time on Netflix and social media, which are not bad things in moderation, and spend so little on the things that so deeply affect our everyday lives? Our unconcern towards politics, our diminishing appreciation for our freedoms, and our forgetfulness of even our own history eerily echoes Aldous Huxley's greatest fears. We like to treat politics as an optional activity, one that if we have time, we just might think about once in a while, and if we're feeling up to it, election day. Our culture has made it not only acceptable, but sometimes even more righteous to say, well, I don't really get involved in politics, than diving into the tough, complicated world of government and policy. This is fundamentally unacceptable. There is no reason, there is no excuse for not exercising your rights and your voice. But we make up excuses anyway. We say politics doesn't really matter, that it doesn't affect us. This couldn't be farther from the truth. From defining our foundational rights to education, economic policy, health care, and transportation, government policy absolutely plays a vital and significant role in everyone's lives. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Charles Krauthammer penned it this way: "We grow justly weary of politics, but we must remember this. Politics, in all its grubby, grasping, corrupt, contemptible manifestations, is sovereign in human affairs. Everything ultimately rests upon it. Politics is the driver of history." And even with the invaluable right to have a voice in how we're governed, a right denied to mankind for almost all of human history, we say our voice, and specifically our vote, won't matter. It's just one vote. What's the point anyway? When I wrote this speech, I could have devoted a long time delivering a laundry list of anecdotes from the 537 votes in Florida that determined the 2000 presidential election, or the elections that have been decided by just one vote. But I realized that if you're just looking at the tangible, the quantitative effect of your vote, you're missing the bigger picture. There's a reason why people from China to Caracas, why the brave members of the civil rights movement and our servicemen and women endured and endure such hardship and are willing to risk their lives for the freedoms that we now have and, all too often, don't use and in effect forfeit. It's a disgrace that the youth voter turnout last year, lauded to be a historical high, was just above a paltry 30%. That's less than 1 in 3. And the 2014 midterm was just above 1 in 5. No wonder Washington and our state and local governments don't seem to represent us. We don't make our voices heard, at least where it counts. You can make all the Twitter and Instagram posts you want, but it doesn't really make an impact unless you get up, make your voice heard, and vote. If you feel strongly about a particular issue or frankly anything, if you want a system that better reflects its constituents, if you want to make a difference, you need to be politically involved and informed, and you need to vote. Your vote and voice, no matter how insignificant it may seem to you, is a message to your government, and they will listen. It tells your representatives where you stand and what they should do to keep their office. And even if your candidate loses, your vote tells the winner what they need to do or not do to win your confidence, maintain the confidence of those who voted for them before, and get reelected. It's a message that has been bought by the sacrifices of countless patriots, of countless courageous men and women. It's a powerful act, a voice more powerful than money given to you by those who could not speak up themselves. The ballot is what keeps our politicians, from school board to state senator to president, hoping to maintain or earn your vote, true to their task. This is the beauty of our democratic republic. If you truly love our system and understand the blessings you've received in this land of freedom, you need to be involved. This isn't optional. This isn't a spectator sport. This is your duty. As John F. Kennedy once said, "Only an educated and informed people will be a free people. The ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of all." I hope all that I've told you today about our generation's passivity towards our freedoms and institutions will impress upon you the fact that you can't simply rely upon others to protect your freedoms for you. It's your right, but more importantly, your obligation to ensure that the liberties enjoyed today will be passed on to our children and our children's children, and that they will live in a country and world brighter than the one we live in today. With the freedoms that we are so fortunate to be blessed with, how can our response be anything less? If we fail, if we shrink from the duty of Americans for nearly 250 years and we take our freedoms for granted, we fail to live up to that great task and noble dream so boldly proclaimed on the other side of this state so long ago, that freedom is a precious gift from God, that man deserves to and can live in freedom. Each and every one of us must answer that call because, in the words of John Stuart Mill, bad men need nothing more to compass their ends than that good men should look on and do nothing. We're beckoned by that same American dream, that same ideal that began in the buildings of Philadelphia, to confront our indifference and ignorance, to seek to learn more about our government, our history, and who we are. And this responsibility doesn't magically start when you turn 18. That's because political discourse can't stop after Election Day, nor does our commitment end at the ballot box. That's because for a democratic society to properly function and flourish, it's essential that all kinds of perspectives are actively discussed and challenged. After all, what is a democracy but a bustling marketplace where the citizen is both the chief consumer and vendor? The marketplace is destroyed when we eliminate choice rather than celebrate it, or if we simply don't care enough to come to the marketplace of ideas at all. Intellectual discourse and intellectual diversity are vital pillars of our republic. And just because we're young doesn't mean we can't make a difference. The high schoolers of Parkland have proven this to be true, even if many of them couldn't even vote when they began. And you are not insignificant. More often than not, lasting change doesn't come from the podium before a sea of reporters, but from regular people, from earnest, face-to-face conversation. Working to open and challenge minds, one by one, including your own, is much more effective than any politician's speech, and seeks to break down the barriers that seem to divide us unlike any other time. But to find common ground, we can't simply hear for the sake of debate, but must rather strive to learn how to listen, to be willing to reevaluate our evidence, to be willing to change our own opinions. This reflective understanding is what the Democratic Student Union and I, as the head of the Patriot Society, have sought to encourage with our joint discussions and events. But if we're being honest, sometimes it's a success, and for others, it's not that easy. It doesn't always seem to work as well. At times, the rhetoric gets heated and we lose sight of our larger goal. And there will be times you'll be discouraged too. Times you'll doubt if your own discussions and conversations are really getting anywhere, if they even matter. And it's in these crucial moments that you and I must dedicate ourselves all the more and remember Edmund Burke's axiom that no man can make a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little. It was this hope that has ignited the dreams and aspirations of Americans from our nation's birth, and still can today. There is no end of history. The freedoms we cherish and the values we hold are never set in stone. America has in it the ability to write either the greatest triumph or the most disappointing tragedy in the story of freedom. What each and every one of us does now, at this critical juncture in our nation's history, will paint a portion of that mosaic, that American story, that will be completed and remembered long after we are gone. So what will our legacy be then? What will they say of our generation, of our America? Will they say that in a time when our very freedoms and democracy were being questioned, both at home and abroad, that we remained true to the American dream, that we saw a renewal of the American spirit, that we led the nation towards a reawakening and recommitment of our ideals and values to the necessity and beauty of freedom? Or will they say that we simply tuned out, that we thought our civic duties not important and meaningless, that we, at a time of growing disillusionment with the American experiment, shrunk from our obligations as a people, that we didn't know what a fragile and precious thing freedom is, and weren't prepared or willing to dedicate our all in defending it? History will judge what we do here. The challenges we are facing are complex, and the road may not always be clear. But let us be the generation that, in these dark times, gave America hope. Hope in our republic, hope in our freedoms, and hope in ourselves. Getting involved in politics won't magically cure our country of its problems and ills, but it's a vital first step, a step towards understanding one another, and understanding that America is, as Lincoln said in 1862, the last best hope of earth, and that it is much easier to lose freedom than it is to recover it. FDR and Reagan both said that our country had a rendezvous with destiny. I believe that's just as true today as it was then. And it requires no less than our utmost. This nation, under God, can't pursue its unfinished mission of living up to the noble ideas and aspirations of our founding fathers with renewed zeal and soar higher than ever before unless we dedicate ourselves to understanding our history, politics, and what it means to be an American and what that requires of us. This is our task, the same task faced by every generation of Americans. It's up to us to live to that same calling and duty. It's not a simple one, nor is it easy or its outcome guaranteed. But we're in good company. The chariots of history press forward, and the great men and women of the past look on. Let us face our challenge. Let us begin our journey. Let us take up the pen given by those who came before us, and we will write a triumphant chapter in the story of America. Thank you.